Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of Living with Philosophy. Whether you like it or not, I am your host, Chesh. With me, I have Barry, Avi, Dave, and Frustrated Atheist, who was our last-minute surprise guest, and I'm so happy to have all four of these gentlemen here with me. We have a little bit of proper education in philosophy, we have a little bit of no education in philosophy, and we've got a goblin. Welcome! Today is not going to be too heavy for everybody. If you like philosophy, if you don't like philosophy, if you're kind of interested in philosophy, if you're not interested in philosophy at all, this show's for you, because all this show is about basically is accessibility and making philosophy a little bit more like less in an ivory tower with hoity-toity puffing cigars in an overcoat and beside a fire, and more like, you know, a bunch of jackasses sitting around talking about things, which is, I think, classic philosophy.
I was this close from grabbing my pipe and my jacket and just being,
That would have been perfect.
Are you confusing philosophy with the Lord of the Rings?
So would you guys like to introduce yourself? We'll start with Oppie, and then we'll go to Atheist, and then we'll go to Dave, and then we'll go to Barry.
Hi, what's it called? Going back to school for paleontology, but I really like philosophy of science, so I have some things that I'd like to talk about for that, but that's about it.
Hooray! Frustrated? How you doing?
I'm doing so well. I'm a nobody here on the internet. I say that as like being one of the oldest people in this sphere of the internet. But anyways, I am currently going through school for computer science, but my class I'm taking, one of my classes I'm taking this semester is an introductory to philosophy class. So, yeah.
Dave?
I'm Dave. I mostly talk about philosophy on YouTube. Not very well, but, I talk about it anyway.
Barry?
Hi, I am Barry. I am just a guy.
Just a guy. You can find all these people at links down below in the description, and today we're going to talk kind of a little bit about what's the point? So, like, what is the point of philosophy, and can philosophy justify itself? Because I think that's a problem that I think all of us at least have talked about at least once or twice, or tertiarily, either on Twitter or on our own YouTube channels or in other places. We've all sort of talked about how science is very, very good, and there's like this very weird delineation that's sort of a separation that's happened over time between something that was once very, very much married together, being science and philosophy, has slowly drifted apart in should we call it like a marriage where they're sleeping in different rooms? Or are they a little bit further than that?
No.
I would probably say that.
I wouldn't know. I would say the antipathy is relatively recent. I'd say the antipathy can't be more than 20 years old.
And what does antipathy mean?
Oh, sorry. They feel like actual animus.
They dislike each other.
Yes.
Yeah, they're at the point where they're actually fighting. Yeah, I think I could.
Like we were separate, so.
And so in that has sort of come like this idea that science is very, very good at justifying itself. Like you can make electricity, and electricity is usable, functional to your day to day. But philosophy does not seem to have followed that trend, and it seems like maybe a little bit more opaque, I guess.
I would argue that philosophy is still very much there. It's just that most of the things that we do, we don't recognize it as philosophy.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. Do you have an example for us, though?
Okay, so we for a lot of us here who argue on Twitter, on YouTube, on whatever, one of the issues is that we like to discuss about, like, for instance, in the abortion debate, we have what is a person. And that is a philosophical question. That is, more specifically, in the branch of metaphysics. But if we're looking at like our everyday life, like for the average Joe, you've probably had a question that you have thought about throughout your entire life, whether it be like, where am I going in life? What am I going to do with the rest of my life? That is a philosophical question, regardless if you're just wanting to know what kind of job you're going to do or whatever. It's still a philosophical question.
And I think we've got a really good point to address in the chat already. So thank you so much for joining us. Philosophy might ask questions, whereas science answers the question. And I don't think I would agree with that. But do you guys have thoughts?
I think science can answer questions that have answers that you've defined in advance, yeah.
I would say that science more or less gives us answers in like how the world functions, like how it works, whereas philosophy gives us answers to specific philosophical questions about
What philosophy gives you answers?
So I'm not going to say that philosophy in and of itself answers all questions, but it does. Like, for instance, like if you are wondering, like, what do you take, like if you take a monist approach to something or something like that, like if you're wanting to know specifically what is your specific philosophy about something, it can answer you that if you kind of already have an idea of
So like an individualistic sense, it can help you define yourself as a person, but not necessarily like answer questions overall about who somebody else is as a person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically.
Philosophy gives lots and lots of answers, but conflicting.
Oh, I get it. I see what you're saying. So like you can have philosophy will throw answers out there, but it's up to you to choose which one you want.
Yeah,
There's no right answer. Like there's so many wrong.
No. Think of it.
Yeah.
Think of it. I'm gonna date myself here a little bit, but think of it as the choose your own adventure books. That's philosophy.
It's a Goosebumps book.
Yeah.
Well, I think that there's. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
I'd say life is a choose your own adventure book, and what philosophy does is it does that thing where you say, you know, you can go to page 20 if this happens, or go to page 80 if this happens, and on page 80 it just says you die.
Yeah.
So if you know you're playing those games and you just skip that bit and you don't go to page 80, you decide to go to page 20 after all. That's what philosophy can do for you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's another line to this as well, right? It's like philosophy might ask questions whereas science answers them. As I think you kind of need to look at it from, like, if you take Jurassic Park, for example, in that movie, you have science unfettered just running forward and philosophy asking the question of, should you do this, though? And, like, you can break that down into a statistical analysis, right? But that doesn't really help individuals or help people live a better life. You can't treat people like numbers and expect to have very good outcomes a lot of the time. And Godless Summer for 5 said, I have to say, as a philosopher, I think Bentham was definitely ahead of his time. I'll see myself out now. Very funny. Avi, do you have thought on this one?
What's it cut? I guess like one key trait about philosophy is that there's like unresolved arguments all the time that never can come to a consensus or agreement. It's always disagreements constantly. But that's actually part of a trait that's actually really good because us animals are very good at finding patterns in nature, but you can get really caught up in that and you get wrong patterns or inconsistent ones. So philosophy actually, that disagreement should shake up people that maybe there isn't a pattern where there is one. So it allows you to try to take a step back and not go to page 80 and die. So
where the marriage of science and philosophy has kind of separated and turned against itself, do you think that maybe
I think they work together?
Right. Okay, together. Fair enough. Yeah. The individual subjects work together. It's just people arguing about about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I run a blog called "What's the Point of Philosophy," which I try to explain, and it's difficult to explain, but I try it several different ways. One way I try is to think of it in terms of like philosophy being an art rather than a science. Like if a kid draws a picture of a house, right? It's going to be terrible, but you can't say that it's wrong because it doesn't make any sense. It's an incorrect register for that information. You just say, well, you know, there's a better way to draw that house if you want to say it, but you would never say that's a wrong picture of a house because it's meaningless to say that. And philosophy is like that, I think. And also, when you're talking about asking questions, I mean, that is a value of philosophy to ask questions. Like the reason philosophers, like if they do talk about Socrates so much, is not because he came up with any interesting answers so much as the incredible questions he was asking. And it's the same thing with Sigmund Freud, who came up with maybe the wrong answer to almost every question he posed. But for the first time in history, he was asking the right questions that nobody else was asking. And that's why we like Freud, not because he came up with any particularly, everything's like childhood sexuality with him, and that can't be true, you know. So, but he was asking all the right questions. So that's good. Asking the right questions is good, regardless of whether you come up with any answers at all.
And that follows with science, right? Science isn't necessarily about, like, actually doing science isn't about getting the right, like, your hypothesis being right every time. It's about doing the work to demonstrate whether the question that you've come up with from a philosophical standpoint is valid or has, like, an answer to it. In the, like,
Well, also,
in a
you can never really, like,
sense.
when you put together scientific theories, like something like evolution, right? You say evolution is like a lock now, right? But you can never really prove it. There's no real way to prove it. All you can do is just not disprove it.
Well, it's like the trolley problem, right? I think that's a classic one that everybody thinks of with philosophy, where the trolley problem doesn't really have an answer. It's more of situational.
You decide what you want to do, yeah. But it's more like the black swan thing. You know, in every white swan you find, you're going to think, oh wow, this all swans are white. Look, I just found another one. But in fact, every white swan you find does nothing at all to prove your thesis until you find one black one, and then you know you're wrong.
Right.
I will say that there's a child who solved the trolley problem, in which case he took the one that's on one track, put it over with the other ones, and then ran them all over. That's the true answer to the trolley problem.
One of the things with the trolley problem that I find is that amuses me is that people don't seem to, most people don't seem to grasp the question right away because they start asking questions immediately. Right? The first thing people will do is look for more context because they know that no option is actually justified because they have no context.
Are these bad people?
Are these bad people? Who's on the track?
Person bad? Yeah.
Yeah.
Are your hands tied?
Well, it comes off with this problem of, like...
Do I know any of the people on the track?
Do we know any?
It comes with this problem of this idea of whether or not life has this inherent value to it. And I personally think that that's bullshit. I don't think human life has any more value than any other life that exists personally from, like, an individualistic standpoint. But that's just me, though. Because, like, why? It's the only reason I care about other people's life is because you can be empathetic to be like, well, I care about my life.
But even if you don't care about human life, that doesn't really address the issue because it's all human lives you're talking about. So even if you have the same value of human life, like if it was, like say, I don't know, it would be the same issue, wouldn't it? Because you still have 5 of whatever this is and 1 on this side.
Yeah, but if all values are the same and all those values are equivalent to 0, then it doesn't matter how many people die or don't die.
Doesn't it, though?
No.
When you say you have no value in human life, that's not true.
Well, I didn't say no value. I said that there's no, like, special inherent value than any other life that exists. 4 dogs on the track. I'm going to save 4 dogs over 4 people. Dogs are cool.
Okay.
Right, but you get into the justification.
Let me cast it for you, though, in a way you'll understand. It says 4 dogs and 1 dog.
Uh-huh.
There you go.
No, I just don't play the game. I go, okay, go. Whatever. It doesn't matter. I just detach.
When not playing the game is itself a choice. Okay.
Yeah, right? Or you just go, well, because the big difference is, right, because this was the question about if there's people on the track, and there's one person and you can shove that person onto the track to save those other people, do you shove the person onto the track? And a lot of people don't like making that decision because now they have to take a very specific action that causes the direct death of somebody.
And Peter Singer has a famous paper from 1976, I think. I forget what it was called, but she's out already. She's gone. As soon as I mentioned Peter,
bye.
She said, you know what? This is enough philosophy.
Shit! He brought up some. We're referencing authors. Goodbye.
He's this Australian vegan guy, but he, you know the paper I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the drowning child.
I forget what it's called. It's called
the drowning child one.
Okay, it's a paper he said and it's difficult to argue with the logic, but none of us stick to it. The logic is that if something, it's fairly simple. It's like if you can do something in your power to help somebody, and you know it's something you should do, and it's something you would do using your normal morality, the fact that the people are very far away shouldn't make a difference, right? Or the fact that you don't know the people shouldn't affect the moral value of that action. And he was talking about specifically, he was talking about the famine in Bangladesh in the 1970s. And he was saying everybody who has any disposable income, instead of buying like a new shirt when you don't need one, you should give all that money to famine relief or organizations like Oxfam at the time, the Red Cross, who were dealing with it. None of us do that. At the most, we'll give a donation and say, oh, well, I feel better about myself now, right? Like that's what I do. I'm not.
You could
accusing
argue
him.
the same. You could argue the same thing about like keyboard warriors, right? People who are doing like political activism online, but it never actually hits the ground to make any actual change. Like you argue about this because it makes you feel better, not because it actually elicits any difference.
Yeah.
Joke's on you. I don't do anything to make myself feel better. I'm just a terrible human
You're
being.
just wallowing. You're just steeping in being. Yeah, let's
You don't
go.
drink alcohol or smoke.
Hmm?
You don't drink alcohol or smoke.
I do smoke.
Ah, you fucking liar.
I do it
studied
because I'm a
ethics
terrible
to
human
learn how to be a
being, and I
worse
want to
person.
kill myself faster. Okay.
Smoking is the slowest possible way you could have come up with to kill yourself.
He wants to torture himself for a longer period of time.
Exactly.
Which
I
is
wanna
the
torture
one
myself.
good thing that he's doing with his life.
Yes,
Torturing
exactly.
himself. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He's
I mean,
just
that's-
getting ready for the
Torture.
atmosphere in hell.
Yeah.
How do you guys feel
Exactly.
about? So we talked a little bit about the a little back on track. We talked a little bit about the separation and marriage between philosophy and science, because I think we all agree that whether scientists believe it or not, and whether they agree with it or not, and whether they can argue it or not, they're doing philosophy, right?
Correct.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we're all on the same page for that, and we've all accepted this, where do we put psychology? Because psychology is currently existing as sort of a soft science, and I don't like the terminology, but it exists a little bit as a soft science, somewhere between social science and, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Brain chemistry. So, like, exists between, a soft science and a hard science. And it, like, to deal with people, you have to be dealing, and to help other people change who they are fundamentally, or like change their habits. That's all philosophy, right?
To me, it looks like psychology is about at least 90% philosophy from what I've looked at it, and sociology is almost 100%
Yeah.
philosophy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would say, but I mean,
I'd agree.
psychologists. You get hard psychologists who are like men in the 60s who insist that what they're doing is science, and they would. People like B.F. Skinner would probably vomit if you said what he was doing was philosophy.
Yes, he would.
Yeah, so he would be wrong, like he was about many things. Sorry, just checking the lights there. Yeah.
Check out,
Well, I saw there was a book by Stephen Levitt and Steve Dubner called Freakonomics. Have you read that?
yes.
Good. Okay, they think they are doing economics in that book. Over 90% of that is psychology.
Yeah.
Psychology, yeah.
Well, I mean, how
Yeah.
often do people like just misidentify the things that we're doing? When somebody has a YouTube channel that says, "I'm not a drama channel," and all they're doing is gossip.
Well, even like Mises's
shit.
book and Hayek's book are both psychology books too. Like Human Action is just a psychology.
Say Opie,
book,
Opie.
so-
Say that again.
Yeah?
Say that whole thing again, please.
Oh, Mises and Hayek are also doing psychology. They're not doing like economics in it.
Go on.
The Austrian economics.
Two names.
Mises and Hayek.
Oh, Hyatt. Sorry. Yes, carry on.
What's it called? The Austrian economics economists. They're just both of them are talking about like human action and their psychology and their decision making, basically.
Yeah.
So we got a question from the chat that's asking, is behavioral economics psychology? It has to be.
Yes.
It's behavioral. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yes. And pretty much all economics, whether you like it or not, are behavioral economics, because as soon as you take people out, like what are you looking at? Macro systems where nobody does anything,
And then there's no movement of money, and then there's no economics.
being
The
pushed around by pixies. I don't know.
Understanding that.
problem
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
with the problem with like the so-called soft sciences is it's has problems with generalizability and reproducibility at this point in time. Like, and it's really hard to reproduce your models at a way that you can apply it generally to like how we understand how social and psychological behavior actually happens, and that's why.
Does that come
So-
down to just a lack of data, though?
Lack of comprehension, not data, I would say. It's just
Okay.
we can't. We haven't been able to suss out all that data and find an answer through it. But, you know,
I think that
Sorry
makes
about
sense.
that.
We have.
Lots
Oh,
of
you're good.
psychological stuff is reproducible, isn't it?
Yeah.
yeah, no,
I had
like
Amazon-
over half.
I had an Amazon delivery that just came by, and they were like, It's like, yeah, are you right here? I'm like, I'm coming outside.
Sometimes you just gotta go greet them. Landon in the chat. Hi, Landon. Thanks for joining us. Asked to the panelist, what is the difference between science and philosophy? Is one a subset of the other, or are they distinct?
I would personally say that science is kind of a subset of philosophy because science does ask questions that are technically in the realm of philosophy, but they just go a step further. And it really started off with most of science got started off with philosophers. Like, I mean, if you look at people like Aristotle, his whole entire big realm was biology at first, and then he started following around with Plato and got into the whole entire philosophical areas of it. And he, like, that's what his biology background is, what influenced his philosophy on things. But like, the only reason why he started doing any of that is because he was like, hey, how does this actually work? How do these organisms function? Like, what do they do? And so these are philosophical questions, but it helps.
What do you think, Dave? I'm just gonna let us go in a circle, so I'm just gonna direct to make life a little easier.
Yeah, I think science is pretty much its own thing now. I'm not sure it could be called a subset of philosophy. Like, there's an intertwining of the two subjects, but it's very limited, and most scientists can get on with doing science without actually involving any of the philosophical literature.
What do you think, Barry?
I think science is definitely a subset of philosophy. I think it is the branch of philosophy concerned with measurable things, and that it should come as no surprise that it has little to say to any other branch of philosophy which is not concerned with those things.
What do you think, Albie?
I'm going to be closer to Dave on this one.
Wrong.
Pretty distinct.
You're just wrong. Dave and y'all are just wrong.
You can actually see certain philosophers make this point that are on the pragmatist and naturalist side. You have Peirce and Dennett and the Churchland couple. They reject that knowledge is like metaphysics and epistemology are first knowledge from an a priori perspective. They reject that. You can.
I'm sorry, that was a lot of jargon. Can you repeat?
Yes, it was. So metaphysics is like, it has to do with like what is, and also like identities and stuff like that. Whereas epistemology is the study of how we know things. And these philosophers reject that you can sit in a chair and start there with your philosophy. You actually, science ends up being that you're bombarded with your sense data first before you start making sense with your philosophy.
So I'm going to be the oddball out. I'm going to disagree with everybody. And not only am I going to say that neither are a subset of the other, and not only can neither exist without the other, they are actually the same thing, and our human brains are just subclassing them because they kind of have different sets of what job they're doing. And by job they're doing, I mean the literal people. The philosophers are doing this part of a job, and the scientists are doing this part of a job. They are both utilizing each other's basis that they've put down, but we've made it far enough in philosophy, in science, that our the base of our structure is well enough in place that everybody doing philosophy and everybody doing science is within this initial framework. And so because this initial framework has been established, everybody inside that framework is already using both science and philosophy in that space. So they don't have to bother with asking, like, does gravity function anymore. They don't have to bother with some of these questions that initially had to be asked and answered before we could move forward. So both science and philosophy are ostensibly at this point doing more niche things in little areas, but they're ultimately the same thing until you get at least one weirdo out there that's just talking about something completely different.
So Dave and Opie are wrong, and Chesh is just even more wrong than they are.
Yeah, let's go.
I could probably agree with even more. Part of it has to do with like what we mean by these two words.
No.
And because Well, because we're talking about
No nuance
philosophy, right?
ever. Oh, Poppy.
Sorry,
We're
go ahead.
talking about science and philosophy now in our modern age, rather than trying to date it back to when it was the same thing. And that same thing is even dates back before probably Aristotle. It's so it's before we even had written language at that time.
Bearded Heretic is yelling at us and saying that
There you go.
psychology is 100% science, and I think we would all agree that they're doing science for sure. I don't think it's like... That's why I don't like the delineation between soft science and hard science, but
Yeah.
it's definitely psychology. Psychology is
Well,
definitely
maybe-
philosophy as well.
Like, you ask a question, you could say something like the English language, right? Is English language just kind of broke down and hybridized with German? And that some people will tell you yeah, and other people will say no.
Yeah.
And that doesn't really matter because
I
English
will
and German
say
are
English
just
is a
kind of
bit-
carry on.
Does it
I think
function?
English is a bastardization of all languages.
A lot of them.
English sat there and said, hey France, I like those words you use. I'm gonna go ahead and take those.
Yeah.
Hey,
But the structure of it is
Germ-
Germanic,
Germany?
you know?
They definitely went to Germany too.
Just to continue
beauty-
on with Bearded's
Yeah, sorry.
thing. Sorry. Is psychology 90% philosophy, or is philosophy 90% psychology? Because psychology would provide descriptions as to why people lean towards a certain answer.
So Quine talks about that he basically tried to center back epistemology back to the psychologist. So with naturalized epistemology. So
Everybody's
That's a good
in
point.
despair. Every girl and every boy. But when Quine the philosopher gets here, everybody's going to jump for joy. Hey!
Yep.
come on.
Godless Scummer also asked the panel, I'm currently reading Meditations of Marcus Aquinas, and what are your thoughts
Marcus
on...
Aurelius?
Sorry, Aurelius,
Aurelius?
thank you. Oh my god, I just brained. What are your...
You maxed up Marcus Aurelius with Thomas Aquinas.
I did!
Don't we all?
Nobody saw anything. I don't know what you're talking about. That didn't happen. What are your thoughts on Stoicism being warped by modern broicism?
We're in a meaning crisis, so people are trying to turn to different things, and Stoicism itself back then was a pretty good answer. It was an answer back then because a lot of them were kind of fed up with the polytheism that they had at the time, so they were trying to come up with something else. And at the same time as Christianity, which is another answer to our problems with meaning. So.
Frustrated, you have thoughts on this? I'm just going to go back around since it's a panel question.
I'm gonna say that I get too angry to be a stoic. But I haven't read much about stoicism just yet, or at least I don't know if we're going to, because like right now, like so far I've gone through the pre-Socratic, Socrates himself. I've gone through a bunch of other ancient philosophers, including Aristotle, Plato, and then just here recently we went through Descartes, John Locke, Berkeley, Kant, and so maybe we'll get to them, but I don't know. It's an intro, so I have no clue if we're even going to cover
Yeah.
If
Stoicism. So
if you went all the way, they generally start at in a time frame, and you kind of skipped past the Stoicism by jumping over to
so then there we
Descartes
go.
and Kant.
Dave, what are your thoughts? And also, could you do us a favor? Can you define what Stoicism is?
Oh, leave him alone.
How dare you? How dare you?
how dare you? Hey, Dave, what's Stoicism? I'm not sure what that is. Can you explain that to me, please?
It's the thing that Jordan Peterson teaches.
Oh,
Just to upset
he
everybody.
was.
Or
I
Andrew
thought
Tate.
he was more of a sophist.
That's my trigger word! Sorry, go
I
ahead.
would say Andrew Tate is closer to Stoicism in terms of its
Yeah,
the broy bastardization of it. So
Yeah.
Yeah. We didn't really study a lot of Stoicism during my degrees. We kind of jumped over it. I've read
Is-
meditation.
Fuck off. Degrees.
Is the answer to this like nobody cares?
No,
It's
not
just
that
like
at all.
That's hilarious.
It's something
It's just
that you
like the
kind of
pre-Socratic.
specialize in, really.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that's pre-Socratics. Now, you bring it up and you're like, that's a thing. But anyway, here's this other stuff real quick.
I guess if people want to read about Stoicism, a modern contemporary philosopher would be Massimo Pigliucci. He's also a biologist, so it would be a good one.
I'd recommend Greg Sadler as well.
Yeah. So.
Who?
Gregory Sadler.
Oh.
He's just one of the best philosophy channels on YouTube, if anybody wants to learn any of that. I think Stoicism has a lot of good stuff in it, though. It's like Opie says, there's a meaning crisis, and people are looking for places to find meaning and how to live a good life. So Stoicism is a nice wrapped-up package for that, dealing with problems in life, and has its own ethics and whatnot.
Barry, what do you think?
Tell you what I think. I think Frustrated Atheist saying that he went through Aristotle is bullshit. Secondly, the thing about Stoicism is, I guess, it kind of is what it is, you know? We just got to deal with it.
He flashed Barry Allen like...
Barry's over here trying to call me out.
He is?
He's gone. No, the reason I'm saying that is because I bought a book by Aristotle called Ethics, right? And I went up to a bookstore I'd never been before. I gave the book to the guy, and he just looked at me and he says, "You won't understand this." The guy selling me the book, and he was right. So I am very suspicious of anybody who believes they've gone through Aristotle. So.
Mark, who's been... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I was just gonna say we didn't really do a lot of in depth. They were just like, hey, this is Aristotle. This is what he believed. This is how he gets around this thing. This is all of his stuff. Anyways, let's go on to the next thing because this is like a
that wasn't all of his stuff.
Briefly touched on his existence in some of his writings. He acknowledged his existence.
Like one of the funniest things that I remember from Aristotle was the fact that like something similar of what happened to Socrates was he saw coming towards him, and he's like, I'm not going to let the state do a disservice to philosophy twice, and he fled because he was like, nah, you ain't getting me, son.
Babe just bravely ran away.
Run away!
Mark Akamoto, who's been a member for 3 months, says the answer is 42, and Manya, who's been a member for 52 months, says, I think this is the best stream to use this for. Thanks, Manya. Thank you so much for joining us so far. I did see a question earlier that I do want to touch on because it kind of like branches off of this Stoicism question, and it's from Alex that says, what have philosophers done for us except give debate bros an excuse to be as obnoxious as possible?
Now I just want to watch.
What have they done for me lately?
I do think you can tell the difference between somebody who's studied a little bit of philosophy and who's studied a lot. A little bit of philosophy is like, oh, you are doing this, you are making this logical error, and you are ad hominiming and all this kind of stuff, right? When you study a lot of philosophy, you realize what's happening inside your own brain. You're like, oh my God, am I doing this? Oh dear. And you tend to externalize a lot less.
There's a big difference between
that is a fallacy that we call this fallacy, and I need you to stop it.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's a big difference between like rhetorical arguments and there's a difference between rhetorical arguments and debate philosophy, and like the philosophy of the universe and all things within it and how your brain functions and metaphysics and yada yada. So what you could say is, I think I would say, at least I would argue that debate bros are only using a very small twig on a branch of philosophy, and they're mostly just weaponizing it, and it's very much lives in the land of Dunning-Kruger. It's from
not
what
really
I can
interested in debating at all. They're just like talking to each other in dark rooms
and making money.
There's
a little bit of philosophy makes you Deepak Chopra.
Sorry, what was that?
A little bit of philosophy makes you Deepak Chopra. Studying philosophy makes you an alcoholic.
Yes.
But the question here, Dave, is what do you mean by a little, and what do you mean by a
we
bit,
should,
and what do you mean by philosophy?
I'm sorry, who let Jordan Peterson in here?
There's
Hey.
a good point to be made, though.
I will
Um,
explode.
There's a difference between philosophy and being like a sophist. Like the sophists
Yes.
don't care about wisdom or the Sophie of philosophy. They actually care about victory, which is actually not philosophy. It's philo Nike, which is like the tennis shoe Nike. But it's about winning the argument rather than being having a concern for truth. So
It one of the funniest things is the way the sophists used to argue, and it like they didn't care. They were the definition of a W is a W. And so it didn't matter what it was. Like, so for instance, if all of us were in a debate right now, and all of a sudden I was like, yes, you see, this is all fine and dandy, but what is Dave wearing? Oh my God, that hoodie?
Yeah.
Oh, can you really trust a man who wears a hoodie to a debate?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And if enough people were like, yeah, why is he wearing a hoodie to a debate? I've won the debate. At that point,
I have literally had
So they're literally
discussions.
W's a W.
I had a discussion once, a good number of years ago, with, I think his name was Dave Smalley, if I'm remembering correctly. He's like an
I know Dave
atheist
Smalley.
podcaster. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that one.
I had a discussion with him, and he was trying to argue the atheism versus theism versus, like, what is an atheist, right? Like the lack of belief thing. And I asked him a question, and he just went on this whole tangent about that culminated in his, but have you been in a debate, though? And I was like,
Oh my God.
does it matter?
Well, how about this? Philosophers is philos and sophos, right? So if it's Nike, and we call them, instead of saying sophists, we'll call them philonikers. How about that?
Just
there you go.
philonikers.
Love victory.
All of Barry's debate is rendered mute because he's a member of the CIA, the FBI, and the WTF over there. So
That's fair. Yeah.
See, look, yeah.
The number
That
of
means
times
you automatically lose all the time, Barry.
the number of
That's fair.
times I've
Very
had,
fair.
I don't know if this is because I'm of the female presenting variety, if this happens to me more often than it happens to you guys. I don't know if you guys experience this very much. You'll have to let me know. But the number of times that I've had people respond to an argument or a point I've made with, but her hair is insane.
About you.
You see,
Yeah, oh yeah.
why?
How's your hair insane? The side shave.
Yeah, they just don't like the hair. It's like, it's so
you see,
distracting.
you have the
Philoniker's gonna Philonica.
Like,
yeah, you have the you have the hairstyle of the new wave feminist. So clearly, you are in the wrong already.
Oh, I need a little bit of blue,
People
don't
would have
I?
gone with bisexual,
No,
but
but-
okay.
Mm.
Bro, bisexual
people
too,
were
because,
shaving the sides of their head
You
in
can't.
high school.
You don't even know what
10
you
years ago.
like.
I don't know. That's a common hairdo from like 10 years ago, 10, 14 years ago. So
Thanks. So do you guys not experience this?
The way he delivered that without any sort of smile or goodwill or whimsy at
I'm
all.
sorry.
Just straight into
I
the-
keep
10
resting
years
bitch
ago.
face all the time. So
Brilliant.
I have what I call resting dick face. So
So do you guys experience that? Is that something that happens to you terribly often? It happens to me all the time.
No,
No, never
I
happens.
normally in person, no. It usually online. I have somebody always like, it's like, oh, you have a Ukrainian flag in your thing. Oh, your opinion's discarded. And I'm just
Oh
like,
yeah.
Now there's something that was
what?
very 10 years ago. Supporting Ukraine against a Russian invasion.
yeah,
Of
exactly.
course.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's because I cling on to everything. This here is a pearl snap shirt. That went out of style back in like 60s. So
So we talked
I hold on
about
to old shit.
philosophy, psychology, and like how philosophy relates to psychology, how philosophy relates to science. How about politics?
Ooh.
How does philosophy apply to politics? Because I think it applies very heftily to like somebody's personal politics, but I don't know how much it necessarily applies, or if it applies differently to like the philosophy of like that's a philosophy of like a society, right?
That's full on philosophy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's mainlined philosophy.
Yeah.
The justification and organization of power is basically all that is discussed in politics.
So do you think that if I walked up to like the average citizen of a country, and let's call it a country that has a relatively defined identity, because some countries have less of a personal identity than others, or a less personified identity than others, I guess we should say. Do you think that if I walked up to a citizen in a country like that, they'd be able to tell me what the philosophy of their country is?
Not if you phrase it like that.
No.
Okay, well, how would you phrase it?
It's gonna sound.
What's going on here then?
Yo, what up, hello, fellow children.
Or you can go all British with it. What's all this then?
Yeah, well, like, whenever I go to a new country, like I travel around or whatever, whenever I go for a new place, all I want is bookshops and museums, right? And when I'm done with that, I will talk to people, but only about like, tell me what's the current political situation here? What's going on here with the politics? And they will tell you. They'll say, well, there's a war on and we're being murdered, or we are killing people and they deserve it, or our government is in chaos, or everything's going great. But they will just talk to you about it. You don't have to mention philosophy, because that's kind of, it's obvious that it's all philosophy. Just say, what's going on with the politics here? What's the big story? Because I don't read Albanian or whatever.
I mean, the reason that I ask is because, do you think it would benefit society if they kind of knew more about what they collectively as a group, as a country, wanted?
Wanted?
The thing is wanted.
Yeah, countries want things.
What do you mean collectively wanted?
I wouldn't say
countries, society working together to towards a specific goal.
Things.
Oh, sure,
nations.
Is,
so, but the thing is like this is something that like individuals will have a variety of things that they think that is best for the country, and then there's no group of people who are all going to collectively be like, yes, this is something that we want. They're always going to be divided into separate groups. It's just a natural human thing. Is like for instance, what I may want for say the United States, it may not be what Dave wants for the United States. It may not be what you want for the United States. Opie, I don't know where you live, but if you live here too, it may not be what Opie wants. And so we all may, okay, then yeah. Or we all may want the same thing. Do what?
German, sorry, it's just Hitler joke. Yeah.
I don't live in America.
We'll talk about where everybody's from after for some context, but finish what you're saying.
Yeah, but so like we all may want the same thing, but there's another group that doesn't want the same thing, and so like to sit there and say what we all collectively want is kind of odd, because I don't think there's a single, like, there's a couple of things that people may want, but I think more or less what differentiates us is like our means of getting there. Like, so for instance, we all want, we don't want an open border, like a wide open border, but at the same time, what we think would be best for that is going to be wildly different from, say, like a conservative.
So like what you're saying is like the nation, or let's call it the government, is voted on by the people via those votes and their constituents. Their goal is to put forward the things that what the country needs overall in a way that the constituents have agreed upon as a way forward that they would think is ethically responsible. So like the border policy,
that's
right?
One method.
If everybody's like, hey, we want border control, but these people want to build a wall, and these people want to put more put more money into the agency and hire more people that guards said border. You have the voters voting for X or Y, and then if you vote in Trump, you probably don't get a wall, but you feel like you voted for that. And then if you vote for the more money in politics, you've got the people who are like, oh, we can't have any more money, blah 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 blah, all the way down into oblivion.
No.
Wrapping it back up, it's the politics also has to do with the organization of power. So it's whether it's to the people, or if it's to the elites, or if it's to one person in particular. Like, it depends on then the politics is, yeah.
Really quick, Manya for 10 said some people just reduce the quality of discussion with such ridiculous deflections, like the hair in brackets, and I think they insult themselves and have and their intelligence when they do so. Yeah, do you guys have any particular, like, debate me bros that you think are actually intelligent, or do you, like...
No.
I don't.
No. I've come across a lot of debate me bros. Okay.
I guess the smartest to make me bro would be Avi, if you've ever heard of him. He talks a lot about veganism with another person on YouTube, if you've ever ran into those people.
Oh, okay.
Probably.
Interesting.
But
ask yourself.
Ask yourself.
Yourself,
yeah, those two. They're very debate me bro, but I would say that they're not idiots, I would say.
Most of the people I now come across is usually on Twitter, and these are people, like, I've had someone sit there and try, like, I'm having a conversation with them, and they're like, you're using this fallacy, you're using this fallacy. I was using neither one. Yeah, I was using neither one, but just because I wanted to prove a point, I started going off on all the fallacies they were using. I was like, you realize that you're using the fallacy, correct? And they're like, and then they didn't want to talk to me anymore once they realized that I know what the fuck these fallacies are, but I'm not going to sit there and just throw them out like,
don't
you
bother
use this fallacy, so you're wrong.
Yeah, if there's
it's going to break your heart.
Fallacy, that I feel like maybe I'm wrong about this, but I feel like fallacies just get abused, particularly on Twitter, currently known as X.
They do, yeah.
They
People
just
treat it like a bingo game or something.
Yeah, or
Also,
like it's like some kind of gotcha to be like, yeah, but we're having a discussion. I'm making a point, even if I misspoke or didn't make my argument in the most concise way. Can you actually address what we're talking about, as opposed to
also
just...
I want people to realize something. Logical fallacies, 9 times out of 10, are mainly for debates.
Debates. Yes.
No one on Twitter is owing you a debate. So if you're over here trying to have a discussion with someone and they just aren't, like, talking to you, they just decide to instead insult you, I want you to know that A, that's not ad hominem, it's just a flat out insult, and B, you are not owed the debate, so don't act as if you are.
Do you guys have a favorite? Like either rhetorical
really
tactic or fallacy, yeah.
Ad hominems piss me off. Because
Well, you would say that.
Exactly. So, like, there's a difference between insults and ad hominems, and when people don't understand the difference between those two, when you're arguing at the person rather than at the things they're talking about, that's a different thing entirely than calling somebody an idiot.
And you don't have to insult someone to ad hominem them either. You just have to direct the argument towards them personally instead of what they're trying to say.
Yep.
Yeah. Me personally, I've always hated the
French.
I always hated the one. Well, of course, I always hate the French. The French suck. But anyways, no, I've always hated it when people tend to pick and choose when poisoning the well is a good strategy. I always hate it. You'll have people who sit there and be like, that source is terrible because look at what they did in the past. And then it's like, these are the same people who are using, like, AIG or using this or using that. And you're like, what?
I
can't believe you used Wikipedia, people. And I said, where do you get your information from this guy's YouTube?
Oh my god.
Stanford Encyclopedia.
I hate that. Like the
3 degrees removed from Wikipedia.
What are the things about Wikipedia that so Wikipedia is a great source for general information.
Yeah.
If you were like saying, hey, I don't know much about this, here's a Wikipedia article where I got some information about the general information about this. And someone wants to be like, you get all your information from Wikipedia? Bitch, no, I just said I don't know this. So this is a great generalization of the
base
idea
understanding.
that I'm getting across. Yeah.
That's a good one. Dave, what do you got for us? You got a favorite?
The G.I. Joe fallacy.
Go on.
It's not very well known, but it kind of suits this discussion as well. It's when you make the mistake of thinking that you know you don't make fallacies because you've learned what fallacies are. So it's what is it? Knowing is half the battle, kind of thing.
Yeah, G.I. Joe. Yeah, knowledge is half the battle. Yeah.
I know a guy who knows
learn
an
what
alcoholic
fallacies
still
are.
drinks.
Nice. I've always been a fan of. So I really don't like discussions that devolve into conversations about like word usage. So like stuff that ends up being just about like, oh, okay, but what does this word mean? And it's like, okay,
the definition fallacy.
Yeah, definitions or semantics, right? When things just like, okay, it's like in some, I don't mind discussions about semantics. So if you want to have the conversation about, whether or not atheism means a lack of belief or a belief that no gods exist, I don't care. Which one is good to use at whatever time is a more interesting and valuable discussion to me than actually deciding which one is the real definition, because I think that's just stupid. But I also love me a good Gish Gallop.
So I'm one of those that
I will use a Gish Gallop 100%. Sorry, go ahead.
So one of the things that I've always said about whenever it comes to the definitions thing is like I try to remove myself as much as possible from it, because I sit there and tell people, I'm like, look, atheist is a polysemous word, meaning you can use either the lack of belief or the belief no gods exist are both equally acceptable. Let's move on from this and go over here. And then whenever people try to come at me, but what's the definition? I'm like, I don't give a shit which definition you choose.
Which one are you using?
Which one do you like? Which one do you use to describe yourself? Okay, let's go with that one.
Right.
There's a philosopher I like called Ludwig Wittgenstein, and he said words do not have definitions.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think he's right. I think no word has any definition. The word he used as an example was the word I, which, if you think about it, has 8 billion different definitions on this planet. And if a word has 8 billion different definitions, then it might as well have no definition at all. But all the words are just pointing towards various understandings of things and what you mean by it in that particular sentence. And as long as, like, I have this problem with feminism when I was discussing feminism. People can have a discussion about feminism and be talking about completely different things.
Oh, 100%.
And then halfway through the conversation, you realize, oh, wait a minute, this is why you're an idiot. It turns out I'm the idiot, because I've been using a different understanding of the term throughout this conversation.
It's this problem of, this is why in a lot of discussions or even debates, you need to define your terms before you start. And everybody has to agree to whatever terminology you're using. If you're talking about evolution, for example, and you're having a conversation about biological evolution, then we all have to understand what the definition of evolution is for the conversation to progress. That's why you see a lot of these conversations and debates on the internet going in circles, and you're having the same discussion over and over and over again.
No matter how niche it is, it's possible, because you take something like Einstein's theory of relativity is like matter is energy, right?
Yep.
But the word is there means multiplied by the speed of light squared, which is such a niche understanding of the word is. But nobody has any problem discussing it.
Right.
Like, once you understand what you're doing, it doesn't matter how niche the explanation is or whatever. Once you're all talking about the same thing, it doesn't matter. And very rarely would you hear anybody say, oh, by the way, I've defined is here as multiplied by the speed of light squared, because they all kind of have an understanding of it. But it's a weird way to define things. So you mightn't even need definitions. You just need a common understanding.
I think a good way to describe this is that you don't discover a definition. It's something that is applied within the context of a discussion or within the context of communication.
Well, meaning in general, I think. Sorry, go.
Oh, I was just gonna say the thing is like, the thing is, I was gonna say that the biggest thing is like words, they don't really have meanings; they're just usages. Like these are just common usages.
That's the Wittgenstein thing.
Dictionaries are just describing what the common usage of every word is at a given point in time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so
it's not telling you anything.
No, it's not. There's no like you can't give any intrinsic meaning to words, which is why whenever it comes to like when people are like, oh well, what is a woman? They're like, oh, blah 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 blah. It's like the way people wanted to define certain things is like it's like you can't do that with anything. You cannot like for instance, you cannot define a chair that excludes all non-chairs. You just can't.
Correct.
There's no way to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
Also, I would go further than that.
okay.
I would say that there's no inherent meaning to anything. I would say meaning is not an intrinsic property of anything at all. Meaning is something we do. It is an activity. We decide what means things. And then somebody will come back and go, oh, what about pedophiles and what? Yeah, everything.
Yeah.
Sorry. You decide as a nation or as a society or as a group of people, meaning is an activity. It is a verb, meaning. And we in the sense of people in general, think meaning is something that things have. And if we could just get at the meaning, then we would know what the meaning is. So a question like, what is the meaning of life, is nonsensical.
Yeah.
From that point of view, because it doesn't mean anything.
It's something that you apply to it. I mean, and now we've circled back to Barry agreeing with me that life doesn't have an intrinsic meaning.
Nothing has an intrinsic meaning.
But this is why
have you ever thought that it's because you? Have you ever thought that life has no meaning because you haven't accepted the Lord Jesus Christ into your heart?
Yes.
Yeah.
But also.
Okay.
But also, this is why I get
Christian.
looked at so weird when I say, we just made up money, right? It's just something we made up. The economy is just something we made up. We can just decide not to do things this way anymore.
It started as, what is it?
Yeah, credit?
Yeah.
Credit is just made up nonsense.
It started off as, obsidian shards at one point over in Burr.
We do have a super chat from Godless Scummer for 5 that says, my favorite fallacy is the argument from caps lock, or as I call it, the bionic dance fallacy. And then he wanted to clarify and said, I should say on the record that on a personal level, I like bionic dance and get along with her, but it's a bugbear of mine that I've told her about when we've had heated disagreements.
All of Robert Smith's tweets are in capital letters. Did you notice that?
No,
Every single Robert Smith tweet is in capital letters, all of them.
Why?
Because he's a fucking genius. Everything Robert Smith says and does is amazing.
Oh, okay. So we should all start tweeting in capitals, all caps.
I'm going to go a step further and start talking in capital letters.
Unleash the rage.
I'd like to go back to Opie there and talk about the obsidian shards, because that sounds awesome.
Okay, but we're going to have to put a pin in it and talk about it next time. Because we are at our hour mark.
I'll tweet you, mate. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, we've been here for an hour already.
No, we haven't.
That flew
An
by.
hour.
Uh-huh. Thank you all so much for joining us. I'm going to start with Barry, then Opie, then Frustrated, then Dave, and they can tell you where that you can find them. And if you want to ask us more questions, please feel free to put them in the description down below. Or sorry, description. You can't touch that. Only I can touch it. The comment section down below. I'll make sure to collect any questions for next time as well. Obsidian Shards, I guess, is going to be one of our next topics that we'll be starting with. Hi, Puck.
Okay.
And the links to everybody's stuff is also down below. Barry, where do people find you, and what are you about?
I am solo 1Y everywhere all at once. If you type that into Google, you're going to get every single thing I do. I live in Ireland.
I'm on Twitter, and that's about it. What's it called? It's Paleo Philo, but I put an AE in that paleo to avoid getting bots from the dietitian people. So,
Fair. Fair. Good trick.
It is a good trick. So yeah, if you can find me there, it's PALAEIO, and then Philo. So.
Well, I guess it's my turn. I am Frustrated Atheist. I have a channel on YouTube that I haven't put anything in like 2, maybe 3 years, but I plan on getting back to it soon. Dave especially wants me to do some philosophy stuff because that's Dave. But I do plan on getting back to it whenever I'm not swamped with homework. But
Fair.
Yeah, you can find me there, or you can find me on Twitter with the @ of FRUSTD_atheist, or just type in King Frustrated and you'll eventually find me. Yeah, that's the places you can find me. I'm either there, or you can find me on Discord somewhere if you're in any of the Discords I'm in.
Awesome. Dave?
You can find me on YouTube and Twitter. Just search for Trolley Dave and you should come up with me. If you do it in Google, you'll probably find a whole bunch of old video game accounts as well.
Hell yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. I do have a couple of philosophy video game stuff that I do want to talk about on this channel eventually, because there's some crazy stories. And, like, I should say philosophy in media, I think would be more like the discussion, because we don't want to be too niche about it. But thank you so much for joining us. We will be back next Saturday. Sorry, not next first Saturday of the month, because we do this the first Saturday of every month. Keep an eye out for the link, hit the bell, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thank you so much for supporting us and being here. Again, links for all these guys are in the description down below, and I will be adding Frustrated Atheist to that list. And we're going to get out of here. Say goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.